In this final episode on Old Mine Road, I spend some time with areas that are mostly well preserved, as I didn't want to leave this area giving the impression that it's only made up of the abandoned. As you'll see here, there are structures and places that have been looked after over the years, which gives us a glimpse of what the area must have looked like when it was a thriving community. The first stop is the old Calno School. Built in 1870 and then rebuilt in 1910, it stands today boarded up tight, but it wasn't long ago when its windows were still allowing visitors to peer in. I've read only 30 students were on the school's register, and that daily attendance averaged only 15. By 1940, it was put to municipal use, and that inside there are voting booths, maps, a piano, and a blackboard. I suppose vandalism led to the windows being covered, but it wasn't so as late as 2004. I'd love to see the inside, but at this moment, it doesn't look like that'll ever be possible. Within walking distance of the school, there's a barn I found in Google Maps that I've been tempted to see for some time. There are no trails to it that I found, and it's not sticking to the theme of preserved structures in this video, but I knew this was probably the last time I'd be out here until spring, so I had to try to get to it. The trek up to it was absolutely awful, as most of the area was filled with thorn bushes ripping at my jeans and making my hands bleed. The thought of going home not seeing it seemed worse, so I kept going despite there not being any sign of a trail at all. Finally, it was in sight, and for the moment I could focus on the visit and worry about the return trip later. The inside looked like no one had been here in a long time. The only footprints in the dirt I could see were either that of dogs or coyotes. The upper floor looked brittle, so at first I wasn't going to try the stairs. Using the rock wall to my right, I decided to try and get a peek of the upstairs after all. The whole place had the look of someone leaving almost overnight, and it looked like there has not been many visitors here in a long time. The trip back was no bargain, and I was really glad to be back on the road towards the schoolhouse. From the Calno School, it was just a quarter-mile north to head up to the Van Campin farmsteads. The first house is the Abraham Van Campin House, which was built in the early to mid-18th century. Abraham was an early Dutch settler who owned more than 1,600 acres and was the uncle of Isaac Van Campin, the owner of the Van Campin Inn we visited in an earlier episode. Descendants farmed the property until it was purchased for a summer home in 1932. I first saw this place over 10 years ago, and it's been boarded up like this since that time. However, as seen here, it looks like some have been able to enter the place, and we can only hope that it's not going to lead to any damage. Further in from the main road is the Benjamin B. Van Campin House, which became a summer boarding house called the Honeysuckle Retreat from 1915 to 1922. All the times I drove by this area, I never walked up this far before, and I was struck by its maintained lawn and how it seemed it was all inhabitable not that long ago. Unfortunately, however, unless additional maintenance is offered, I don't imagine this place will be standing as it is in the not-so-distant future. The barns on the property were equally impressive. Right across the street was the James Van Campin House, which I fortunately was able to see a little more than 10 years ago. In 2012, I stopped by only to find it was destroyed by a fire, and all that was left was its stone foundation and chimney. Today, I was stunned at how fast nature claimed this spot, and someday soon there will be no obvious evidence left to show that anything was here at all. Its barns on the property still stand, but are in bad shape now. The next stop is the Millbrook Village historic site. This is a recreated 19th century village which reached its peak in 1875. I've read that some of the buildings are original, where others were moved here during the failed Tox Island project, which threatened the existence of many homes and buildings. There are special events throughout the year, and on summer weekends, some of the buildings are open to the public. I attended one of those days a little more than 10 years ago, and I can say it's well worth the visit. Next, I was off to see the old Delaware View House. This is a place that was still open years ago when I first learned of it, and I really regret not having gone inside at the time. Originally a farmhouse built in 1837, it received a 2.5-story addition in 1892 and became a lodge known as the Flatbrook Hotel. I've read that it became known as the Delaware View House until 1926, when the building became known as the Salamovka, a resort for Russian emigres. When I first came upon it over 10 years ago, it was some sort of general store that offered sandwiches during the day. But a near tragedy struck in 2009 when a 7-year-old girl was nearly electrocuted when she stepped on an electrified metal plate the owner had on the property to fend off a bear that had been visiting often. Fortunately, the girl's father revived her with CPR, but not long after this event, the building closed for good. As you have probably noticed, there are ways into this building, and sadly that usually leads to some sort of destruction of the property. This will most likely be another piece of history lost to neglect and/or future damage. Now it's further north to the Wallpack Center, a farming community established in the mid-1800s that had defiantly stood against the Tox Island Dam debacle and still stands today looking as it did in the mid-1960s. It included a post office, church, a former school, and 6 houses. One serves as a small museum, while another is currently a residence. Everything here is well preserved and has been this way since I found it over 10 years earlier. If only the federal government had done its homework prior to chasing most people out of the area before embarking on its failed project, perhaps most of this area would still look like this. Just a couple of miles away, I thought I'd bring this final chapter to a close, not with something built by people, but by nature. It's one of the tallest waterfalls in the state of New Jersey, known as Buttermilk Falls. It has a great set of stairs all the way to the top. All along the way, the stairs stay close to the water, giving you unique views. At this point in the day, the sun was setting, and so was my time here this riding season along Old Mine Road. Even with these 5 episodes, I've only scratched the surface of what lies here. Traces of the past constantly reveal more of what was to the frequent visitor, and one gets the feeling it could fill volumes of stories. Each time I come out here, there's something new that catches my eye and leads to yet another trip to the past. I hope you enjoyed this series, and I thank all of you who came along with me. For now, it's time to put this steel horse away and make room for the snow and ice to come. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you down the road.